All right, welcome to the Odyssey. This is the first book that we'll be reading for English 9 this year. Not the entire thing, because it is super long, but some of, in my opinion, the very best scenes in this book we'll be reading and talking about together. So I think it'll be great. I think you guys will like it a lot. Please do make sure that you take notes during this video, as there will be a quiz in class. And any notes that you take, that you handwrite, not screenshots, but notes that you handwrite, you may use on that quiz. So take as many as you possibly can, and you can use those. All right, let's get started. Okay, so before we talk about the Odyssey, the plot of the Odyssey, it's really important to know some background information about the story. And that brings us to a very, very quick summary of the Trojan War, because the Odyssey takes place immediately after the Trojan War. The Trojan War lasted for about 10 years. It was thousands of years ago. We're not sure of the exact date, but we think it was approximately 1180 BCE. And the author of the Odyssey just so happened to write another book called the Iliad, which is essentially a prequel because it's about the Trojan War and some of the characters and soldiers involved in that conflict. So the whole war, believe it or not, started when a guy named Paris, who was royalty, who was a prince of a city called Troy, falls in love with and then runs away with a very, very beautiful woman named Helen. Now, that sounds great, right? Good for them. Hope they get married and have a great honeymoon, whatever. Well, there's a problem. Helen is already married, and she's married to an extremely anger-prone king of Greece named Menelaus. So he's not so happy to hear that Paris has run away with his wife. So he meets with his brother, another king of Greece named Agamemnon, and they declare war against Troy. They manage to gather up thousands and thousands of soldiers to invade and start a 10-year-long war. All because Menelaus' wife left him. So we all have to kind of ask ourselves, was that really worth it? And, well, I would say probably not. A little bit more about the Trojan War comes to a very abrupt end after 10 years of fighting, when this guy, a Greek general named Odysseus, and that is a name we're going to hear a lot because he also happens to be the main character of the Odyssey. And you can see where the name of the book came from. He has this great idea to sneak into Troy, hence, well, this is where the Trojan Horse comes from. It's supposed to be a gift. They say it's a gift, that it's something that they can sacrifice to the gods. Meanwhile, Greek soldiers hide inside of it, and then they come out in the middle of the night, open the city gates, and invade. They take the Trojans by surprise. A lot of great warriors and kings and princes die in this conflict. You might know the name Achilles, for instance. He dies during the Trojan War. And the main thing to take away from this, though, is to know that Odysseus was a soldier during the war, and that the plot of the Odyssey is about him trying to get back home to his island called Ithaca when the war ends. So he's been away for 10 years at war, and he really just wants to get home to his wife and his son. But things actually don't go very smoothly, as we'll find out soon enough. In fact, it takes another 10 years for him to get home. So he's been home for a total of 20 years. And just to illustrate how long 10 years can be to get home, this is from a movie called Grosse Pointe Blank, and Jeremy Piven, I think, does a nice job of demonstrating the shock of missing someone for 10 years.
No. Yeah. So you look good. You seem good.
Thank you. You may have, 10 years, man! 10! Where have you been for 10 years?
There we go. So 10 years. Takes Odysseus 10 years to get home. And he's already been away for 10 years fighting in a war. So it's a rough life for the guy. You feel for him. Okay, so that's the plot of the Odyssey. Some of the important terms that will be helpful as we discuss it are listed on this page. And the first is an epic poem, which you may have learned about in middle school, but I'm not entirely sure, so I just wanted to review it. And an epic poem has certain characteristics. It's going to be long, it's going to have a heroic character, and a plot where that character is fighting monsters and saving the day, and things like that. Many cultures have some kind of epic poem. The juniors used to read a story called Beowulf, which is an epic poem written in English, way back when English looked totally different than the English we all know and love today. So the Odyssey, not surprisingly, as you can probably tell already, is an epic poem, and one of the most well-known epic poems, I should mention. Then there's this term in media res, which is Latin for into the middle of things, and it's a storytelling device that writers can choose to deploy when they're telling a story. And what that means is, in media res, into the middle of things, is that the plot actually, at the beginning of the book, it starts in the middle, and then later, in flashbacks, we find out what happened. So to get that character to where they are. The show Breaking Bad makes great use of in media res. In fact, the very first episode, you see Walter White standing in the desert, pointing a gun at someone or something, and we have no idea what's going on. It gets your attention, you want to know, and then the rest of the episode is a flashback, and we find out, how did he end up in this situation? So the Odyssey also uses in media res. And then there's this word invocation, and a lot of Greek poetry, a lot of Greek epics, other Greek epics, the Iliad as well, use this. And so even before the plot begins in media res, the first few lines of the story or of the poem are from the author. So in this case, Homer, asking a god for help in writing the poem. It's almost like a mini prayer for inspiration almost. So, and that Greek god that he's asking for help from is called a muse. And in this case, he's asking a very specific muse named Calliope, because she was the muse of epic poetry. Almost there, only a couple more slides. Some of the important people, Homer, of course, I mentioned him before. He's the author. He wrote it down, we think, around 700 BCE. Again, we're not entirely sure because it was so long ago. But we do know that the Odyssey was a story that had been told for a long time before he wrote it down. And it was actually told by these traveling oral poets named bards. And they would memorize this entire poem, travel from town to town, and tell it to the townspeople. It's what they did for entertainment because they didn't have, cool things like Netflix, sadly. Odysseus is the hero of the story. We're going to see a lot about him. He has heroic qualities, but then maybe some flaws that we'll explore as well. Poseidon is a Greek god, very, very important. He hates Odysseus and wants to make sure that he never gets home. Well, why? Well, I don't want to give anything away, but we will find out. And we can debate whether or not Poseidon hates Odysseus for good reason or not. Penelope is Odysseus' wife, who is waiting for him very, very patiently back home on Ithaca. She's been waiting 20 years for this guy to come home. And she is super, super faithful, maybe faithful to a fault. I don't know. Well, that's something that we'll have to talk about in class as well. But it's not that she's just peacefully waiting there. A bunch of annoying dudes called suitors have essentially invited themselves into her house, are camping out, eating all her food, and asking her if they will marry one of them every single day. They're essentially bullying her, but she hasn't given in yet. But, I mean, how much longer could she hold out? Her husband's been gone for 20 years. She has no idea if he's even alive. And then the last character that you guys should know about is named Telemachus, and he is the son of Penelope and Odysseus. He was an infant when his father left for war, so he doesn't know his dad at all. He doesn't know Odysseus. Plus, he's getting kind of pushed around by these suitors. So at some point, hopefully he stands up for himself. We'll see what happens. Okay, and then the last slide is just a little bit of information about this theory that exists in psychology and in literature and in mythology, that all stories about heroes follow a very particular pattern. That the hero has a call to adventure. At first they refuse, but then something happens that makes them go on this journey. They usually meet a mentor who helps them along the way. They have a helper or a sidekick. They struggle to reach their goal and usually end up getting seriously hurt, sometimes even dying and being resurrected, if you think about a character like Harry Potter. And then there's a road back after the ordeal, and they're enlightened, they've learned something, they've become stronger, even if they've been injured in some way. So it's an interesting theory. I've talked about it in my other English classes. It has holes to it, but it's fascinating to think about. And even popular stories now, like Star Wars, they're very much based on stories from thousands of years ago, or over 1,000 years ago, because there's a lot of King Arthur in the stories of, if you think about Luke Skywalker and the lightsabers and the Jedi, that the mystical abilities they have, it's very, very similar to stories of King Arthur from that time period. And there are many more examples that we may or may not talk about in class, but it's just something to be on the lookout for as we read the Odyssey. Where does it seem to follow this pattern of the hero's journey? And then where does it differ from it? Because I think it does both. Okay, so that's the presentation. Please, again, make sure that you have taken notes on this if you haven't already, and bring them to class tomorrow because there will be a quiz and everyone should do well on it. Just make sure that you have them in class and you can use them. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow.